We're live. Oh, look at that. Good afternoon. We are live with, this is our third show, The Roundtable. And I am your host, the working coach, Mom Noelle Federico, also the CEO and co-founder of StaffAgency.com LLC. My comrades in arms from Staff Agency are joining me, Josh Kerner, Karen Siegel. They are part of our managing directors team for Staff Agency. And we have joining us here on the bottom, Mr. Steve Lentini, master coach, someone that's actually worked with us and done some consulting work with us and some training work with us, and someone that I've known truthfully most of my adult life. So we had some requests to talk about imposter syndrome. And we thought that this would be a good mix. 2 women, 2 men talking about imposter syndrome. It's a term that's out there. If y'all haven't heard of it, you can definitely Google it and see that it's something that they're saying like 1/3 of the younger generation is kind of affected by or suffering from that. And approximately 70% of everyone else at some point in their life, has a bout with imposter syndrome. Hi, Janet. We've got people now realizing that we are online. I know it's a weird time, everybody out there. So we just know that you can watch the show later or you can listen to the Spotify version of it. This just happens to be business-wise a great time to get guests and have other people collaborate with us and contribute to the show. I have another show, as you all know, that runs on Saturday morning, and most business people do not have any wish to speak to me at 8:00 on a Saturday morning about anything, least of all imposter syndrome. So let's just jump right in. For me, this is a self-worth thing. It's like so imposter syndrome, just by way of definition, is like you are, let's just use it in the context of work. You're doing a job or you get a promotion and you don't really feel like you can do that job, or this, or you have the skills that you need, or that you can satisfy and, jump into the promotion and satisfy the requirements in a way that works. So that's an example of imposter syndrome as it relates to like your career. And you could also, have that in your life with other different things, but we're not going to delve into that. We're going to stick to kind of the career and work side. So Lentini, what say you about imposter syndrome?
Well, for me, I didn't know what it was. Had never heard of it. And then about 6 years ago, I read an article, and it might have been Harvard Business Review. It could have been somewhere on LinkedIn. But what I discovered when I read the article is, holy smokes, I have some of that. And it was that little voice, right, that resides in all of us, that Rainer Maria Rilke called the little hooligan in the 1800s. So it's been around for a long time. And when I did some research, there were mentions of it in quotes from people 2,000 years ago. So It is part of the human condition. It's just that a lot of people don't call it the imposter syndrome. It's that little voice that you just mentioned, right? That's somewhere in our mind. We'll do something or begin something, and that part of our brain is saying, wait a minute, who you? You can't do this. This is not you. And
who are you to try that? Who are you to do this?
Yeah. And Kelly Vincent wrote a book that I just listened to a couple of weeks ago. And she has a lot of letters after her name. She got her doctorate. And then her brain started trying to convince her that she's not something or someone that anyone would listen to. And it led to her writing the book and doing some work on it and coming up with some simple strategies to overcome it. And it's really worth reading, by Kelly Vincent.
Okay. And all right, so we'll ask everybody kind of what they think of imposter syndrome, and then we'll start to give you some tips on how to, navigate that in your life. So Karen, why don't you jump in?
I really dislike the word imposter. So I think that school of thought is I'm always like, when I hear imposter syndrome, I just don't like he words and labeling in general. It's like a media SEO keyword. But I do, Dr. Valerie Young, I think, did a book, and it's really for the successful woman, and she has 5 different imposter syndromes, and I think it's expert, soloist, natural genius, superhuman, and perfectionist. And that, when you break it down, that's what I really enjoy in researching that, and I think that we all can attribute to that no matter who you are. But the actual word imposter syndrome, I'm like, I can't stand the word imposter, but I do think it rings true.
So tell me, like, what does it mean to you? Okay, so you don't like the label. I don't like it either personally. How does it?
It means to me that you either have one of those syndromes sometimes. So if you're the expert, you're seeking out trainings. If you have a lot of, letters to your name, it means that you typically, you don't think you're an expert enough and you keep getting new trainings over it. If you're the perfectionist, if something goes wrong, you miss the mark, then you're like, I'm not cut out for this because it wasn't perfect and it didn't go in that way. So that's kind of in a nutshell what that means to me.
Okay. And Josh, any experience of any of this in your kind of whole career?
Maybe perceiving yourself as someone you're not, or thinking you're not good enough. I think that happens a lot with people. Yeah. Like if you're the assistant coach and I don't think I'm good enough to become the head coach, but maybe that's just how you perceive yourself. And maybe everyone else around you thinks you probably could be that person for the role. And I'm sure it happens to a lot of people in the workplace where, they're a run-of-the-mill person in the company and they don't think they could become a manager. And what happens to me if I do become that manager? Can I do it? Can I not do it? And if you are in that role, thinking to yourself, I can't do it. But you could be the right person for it. Sometimes you're not. Also, some people aren't right for everything.
Do you see this like let's say there's a client and they have a role that has a title that's, let's just say, a step above a title that a candidate might possess now. And, you look at the resume, you meet the candidate and you believe, everyone believes that this is the perfect person for the role. So do you ever see, do you see that the candidate might not take that role because they don't believe that they would be the person for the job, even though the whole staff agency team, for instance, might think you are the perfect person for this job, but yet the person just doesn't see it?
It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens, let's just say 5-10% of the time. You speak to someone and they look at the job description and right away they say, I don't think I can do this. But that person, whoever's in that seat, had been doing it at one point or never did it before. You're not born at this role or this person in your life. You have to get to that point, right? So someone has to fill that seat and you have to step up to the plate and do that job. No one's born a CFO, right? You have to have to become that CFO. Yeah. So some people just have that mindset where I don't think I can do this.
So what happens in that case, right? Does the candidate take the job and then fail, or does the candidate take the job and then educate themselves, and go and get some grit and moxie and jump for it and do it well? What do you see when these things happen?
I see it more of they just don't take the next step.
Okay.
Right.
So it stops them, right? Then they don't get to advance in their career that they could, right? Because they don't believe in themselves.
Right. And it's not a fake it till you make it kind of thing. It's all right, I've been in this junior role. How do I get to this staff role? All right, I'm going to do this for a year and I'm going to get to that senior role or VP or whatever it is. And some people, I think it's a mindset thing. We're knowing that hey, I've got to do this. Kind of like if you're in sales, I'm going to do $100,000 this year. I'm going to do $200,000 this year, and I'm going to do $500,000 that year. And it's just better what you're selling or what you're doing in the workplace. I think it's all relative. I really think it's a mindset thing. Some people that's not their mindset. They're comfortable in what they're doing and that's okay. And that's what they want and that's fine. But the other side is I'm going to take that role and I'm going to own it and I'm going to learn about it and I'm going to master it.
Right. So, Lentini, what do you in regards to how we can help people to navigate? So let's just say, okay, you have it if you have a self-worth issue. Let's say you're in your career. And to Josh's point, you're sitting in a position and you have the opportunity for a promotion. I see this a lot in my work with people. People have the opportunity for a promotion and they don't take it, or they won't go for it, or they won't chase after it because they just don't believe that they can get it. So they don't even try. And to me, obviously that's complacency. And everybody knows how I feel about complacency. So that's not going to get you anywhere. It's not going to get you anywhere new. So Lentini, when you're coaching, by the way, Steve prefers to be called Lentini in case anyone is wondering why I'm not calling him by his first name. When you're working with someone, let's just say you do a lot of executive coaching, you do a lot of coaching for CEOs and business owners. When you see somebody that's stuck and it's because they don't believe in themselves or they're suffering from this imposter syndrome, how do you get them out of that?
Shock them. And I can tell you that Karen and Josh touched on a couple of things that are really important. One was Karen mentioned perfectionism. And that's that small-minded thinker. That's our little voice that wants us to rise to some level that isn't true. We're human. And so it's getting to the place where you give yourself some grace to be less than perfect. And imagine the perfect person coming on to any company believing they're perfect. There's no room to add anything to that person.
Yeah.
And then Josh said something about comfort, right? They say, well, now this job isn't for me. That's because again, that little voice, that brain, right, that I call the acorn brain, if you don't mind, I'll share the acorn, right? That little small-minded thinker, it loves comfort. It loves comfort. We'll never grow if we call it the imposter syndrome. It's okay to give it a name as long as we want to overcome it and make ourselves uncomfortable. So the thing about that voice is to actually do the opposite. So Josh said, somebody said, or often he hears, now this job isn't for me. That's their comfort zone. And it's to go to the opposite, to suggest it may be time to stretch. And then they learn something. And it could be, when was the last time you learned something new? If it was a sport, right? The first time they got in a batting cage, or it was riding a bicycle, or maybe going skiing, whatever it was. Maybe it was speaking for the first time. If they were uncomfortable and yet did it anyway, if they're not perfectionists, they're going to improve every time they do it. And they can relate to that. And that's really what the imposter syndrome, at least in my mind, is. It's that stretching of the comfort zones and letting go of perfectionism.
Right.
Yeah.
And you have to ask somebody too, like, there's never going to be a time where you think you're the best person for every single thing, everywhere, all the time. So, when someone presents you with an opportunity career-wise, or even in your life, they say, hey, I think you'd be great at this, or I think you should do this. And, if you fail to even try, then like Lentini's saying, you're just dead in the water. You're not going to grow. Like what is your life professionally or personally if you don't have some personal development plan? It's just going to be the same all the time, never anything different. And most people say, here's where I am in my life. I want to go here. And all of us on this call or on this show, we are all coaches in some way. Josh and Karen have staff that they coach, and Karen helps me with practicing DISC and bringing DISC into companies, and Lentini coaches people. So we're all constantly having conversations with people to say, where is it that you want to go? Where is it that you want to grow to? And so you have to make yourself uncomfortable. So somewhere in this trajectory between where I am and where I want to go, I'm going to feel like a fake it till you make, right? Fake it till you make. I'm going to feel like a fake, or I'm going to feel like it's not real. I'm going to feel like I'm saying these words about the income that I want to make. If you're a sales guy and you're working under Josh, he's going to say, what's your goal? How much do you want to make this year? We're in 2024. And they'll say a big number, and then Josh is going to start pushing them. Like, here's what you have to do to get there, right? And so then, Josh, what happens when they, I didn't mean to catch you in the middle of a sip there, but what happens when you say to, someone on our team or someone that you're training, like, they're here and they tell you where they want to go, and then you start telling them the behaviors that they have to do every day to get there? Like, what do you see when that starts happening?
Yeah, Rome wasn't built in a day or wasn't built overnight. It doesn't happen the next day. It's all about laying the groundwork. If you want to make $100,000 a year, all right, how am I going to do it? Not just saying I'm going to make $100,000 this year. How are you going to do it? Well, I don't know. We'll figure that out. But no, it doesn't matter what you do or what it is. It could, your $100,000 a year could be a 10-year plan. It could be, I'm going to do this and I'm going to get to here, and then I'm going to become a manager, and then at the manager level, I'll make $100,000. Or if you're in sales, it's like, all right, if I call 10 businesses a day and I get one of them to pick up, and I get, by the end of the week, 5 of them become, potential clients, and then 1 becomes a client, and I can make $10,000 there, and times that by 10, and you have your $100,000. So it's laying it out, right? You have to have goals, and you have to practice, and you have to repeat and figure out, how am I going to accomplish those goals? I think that, like, expecting results and not doing anything different in life is just, it's insanity, right? It's just never going to happen. That's how people get in that rut of, like, 10 years later being, I'm doing the same thing as I was 10 years ago, and nothing's changed, but that's your own fault. It's just, you didn't change anything from the beginning.
Right.
You didn't set, you didn't make your bed to be in that direction.
Right. So to that point, right, then that would tell us that at some point in your life, everyone, if you're following what Josh is saying, and Lentini, what these people are saying, the same thing that and I'm also saying, if you are here and you want to get there, and you now have to do consistently, and consistency is key, by the way. We may do a whole show about consistency, because that's where people lose the line all the time in their life, is with the consistency, myself included. So if you're here and you want to go here, and now if Josh is training you, he's saying, okay, you're going to have to do these actions every day over and over. Lentini, if he's coaching you, he's going to tell you the same thing. You have to stretch. You have to do this. Somewhere between here and here, you're uncomfortable. You're thinking that maybe you can't do it. You're thinking that you have to be a new version of yourself. So you're suffering from some kind of, like, uncomfortableness, which you might call imposter syndrome. So the thing that we're trying to do here is show you that this whole, like, imposter syndrome, like, it's not a disease. This isn't something that's gonna, prevent you from growing or stop you in your tracks, or it's not the big horrible boogeyman in the sky. It's a feeling that you have because you are stretching yourself, because someone is kicking your behind and telling you, go for that job, do that thing, learn that language, take that trip, stretch yourself, and you don't like it and you're uncomfortable. And so, Karen, what happens because Karen coaches people with me, like, what happens when people get in that place of where they are to where they want to go, and then they're, like, freaking out on us because they don't like how it feels?
The second it gets difficult is where it normally ends. So when Noelle always preaches is when it's difficult and how you respond, not react, respond, is how you're going to hold water when you get to your goal. And that's really important, right? Because when things are going great, it's really easy to say, oh, I'm going to make, X amount a year, I'm going to get this new car, I'm going to, get this new position. But when it's not so great, that's where the true test is, and the consistency, and just keep doing the same thing. That's where people lose it, is when they stop doing the same thing. And so, I think we should do a whole other thing on consistency, but that's really
I agree.
It's really personal consistency. Like, obviously you're going to have your work consistency, which you need to align on, but then it's your personal life too. Is that consistent? What does your house look like? What does your car look like? And those are things I learned more recently, is if I want to be a certain type of person, I need to act like that in all aspects of my life.
Right. You got to be authentic all the way down. There's a whole show in and of itself for sure.
You see it. I see it even with personal fitness. And I'm not saying I'm a fitness guru by any means, but you see these people that are in tip top shape, or, 2% body fat, whatever it is. It probably took them 5 years or 10 years to get to that point. And it's no different than someone making $500,000 or $1 million or $2 million a year. It didn't happen overnight. I'm sure it does happen occasionally. And you hear these people like, oh, they can do this because they're wealthy, or they can do this because, they make a lot of money. Well, like, you can too. But if you're not going to change anything or change your habits, you're probably going to be saying that the rest of your life. Yeah. And if you don't do anything different,
nothing different will happen.
Nothing changes, nothing changes.
It's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Lintini, what happens when you're coaching someone in that same question like that I just asked Karen? So they're here and they come to you and they pay you a lot of money and they say, I want to get to here, and you start kicking their butt and then they don't like it, or they don't think they can do it, or whatever. What do you tell them in the middle there?
Well, it can depend on the situation, but often it becomes part of their default pattern, which is to run away. So then I'll say, okay, it's fine. It may not be a fit. It may be time for you to run away. Is this something that you can recall doing in your previous past, right? In your recent past, or even thinking back in your life? And often they find, yeah, I don't plant my feet. I'm running away. And they're running away from the thing that they fear. And then when
which would be the thing that makes them uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, especially when I tell them you're paying me anyway for the length of time they committed to. Why don't they stay? But I would say 96, 97%, maybe even 99. I'd have to go back through the numbers. Everybody, when challenged, realized, yes, they were running away in their life. They didn't face. They didn't plant their feet. They didn't commit to it. And they weren't persistent about their behavior, and they could find the pattern themselves. I can't help them find the pattern. They have to discover the pattern themselves.
Yep.
And when they do, they own it. And
then they have the opportunity to change it.
The cause of the syndrome was running away. It wasn't what they were calling it. Right? How many times have we had that discussion, Noelle, right? Where people call it something, it's not what's really going on.
Right. Listen, growth is uncomfortable. Take it from me. I've been like 42 years studying success principles. At no time in there ever am I comfortable. And now I've just made a game out of it, right? I'm think you can ask these guys who work with me and for me and hear me and know my personal, because now I search for things. Now I make it into a game. Now I've invented an effectiveness game, and to make myself uncomfortable on the daily. And because I know, right, what I know also is that we can't teach if we can't be in it. So I can't do shows or navigate a company if I'm not willing to just keep making myself uncomfortable. And so this imposter syndrome, like I said, this doesn't have to stop you. It can be an opportunity to take on something challenging, right? And in all these articles that I read last night to prepare for the show in the Harvard Business Review, I have a subscription, so I typed in imposter syndrome, and 6 articles came up. So I printed them all out and I read them. And one of the things that they said was like, get in there with some moxie. And just be willing to learn. Like never think that if you got a promotion, like Lintini said, never think that you're going to walk into that promotion and you've got it, right? Because that's your biggest, Josh is the president of staff agency. He was never the president of a company before we made him the president of staff agency. Karen is a managing director. She wasn't the managing director of this. You see? So it's like, you get it. And then you're like, okay, I'm open. How do I learn? How do I get better? What do I need to do? What path do I have to follow? I think the real crux of imposter syndrome being a problem is when you do nothing, when you either don't jump and don't stretch yourself, or you feel unworthy and you're doing nothing about it, or you feel stupid in your new position and you're not asking anyone to help you, and you're not asking, what can I learn, right? You have to be willing to learn. You guys want to say something about that?
Yeah, I don't think enough people are willing to. That's the thing.
To learn.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, right? Like, continuing education, and you look at even like all the star athletes when they have coaches, and it really should be like that in real life. And I don't know why it's not, but it's just not the norm. It's not the cool thing to do or whatever.
No, but let's use ourselves as an example, you and I, and hopefully you won't mind me doing this. But when when we started the company, it's been almost 4 years. So 3 years ago, Josh and I, started working together. And I've sat in a lot of C-suite positions, never as a CEO, and Josh had never been a president. And so at the beginning, it was just a few of us. So I'm smart enough to know that I don't know what I don't know. However, I also thought that there was some stuff that I did know and that I should just be able to tell it to people and they should just do it. And Josh, Josh the same way. Josh and I at the beginning, we butted heads quite a bit because Josh thought that he knew everything about his, what he was in charge of. And I knew that I didn't know anything about recruiting because I didn't at the beginning. I knew everything about building a company. But what I didn't really know as an expert was building a team and working with a team and allowing other people to be in control, because I have always worked with entrepreneurs in very small company situations. And so it was like me and the person that owned the company, and then that was it, so it wasn't like or if we had a team, it was a different scenario. I wasn't actively running the company with a team. And so when Josh and I first started, we had a lot of, I was smart enough to know that I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I kept saying like, okay, you guys, I see that that wasn't, that I made, an error in judgment. I have to learn to listen better. I have to understand that this isn't all my way. Like at the end of the day, if I have to make a call to protect the company or something, I'll do that. And if you guys don't like me for it, then I'll have to live with that. Meanwhile, though, if it's other decisions, we've got to collaborate. So I appointed 4 managing directors, which is Karen and Josh and Stephen, whom you folks have met, and Maddie, whom you'll meet. So now there's 5 of us, right? So I had to be willing to look stupid. I had to be willing to make mistakes. I had to be willing to go to Josh. Several times I've had to go to Josh and say, I'm sorry, I didn't handle that well, or I should have done something else. And even yesterday, I had to go to Karen and say, you know what? In thinking about that situation with X, I should have discussed it with you first. And so we are all willing to be uncomfortable, is my point, right? We're willing to be stupid in front of each other, and we're willing to, learn. And did I suffer from imposter syndrome? No, because I'm so self-aware at 55 years old, like I get it. I get how I have to behave in order to carry a company. Like I understand. So, Josh, you want to say something about like just that experience with us, how we've had, how we've just really had to stretch ourselves and be uncomfortable?
Yeah. I mean, we started something like from the outside. People may not see everything, but like we started something from scratch, nothing, zero. Right. Yeah. So it was, how do we get this? And what software do we use? And what email? And then it's a website. And who's the first person we're hiring? And who's the first client it was everything. So we probably made a million mistakes and then realized, you fix things over time and it kind of works out. But yeah, like it's not easy. And I think people don't realize that, looking onlookers or whoever it might be, or maybe you're doing a role and I could do this myself and whatever, but like, you don't realize how much goes into it.
Right.
And yeah, we did make a lot of mistakes and we fixed them over time, and we've gotten a lot better, and we fixed our processes and we fixed our procedures, and we've grown our team, and our team gets stronger and stronger and stronger every single day. And it's going to continue to grow. And we've had a lot of hurdles. Our company itself, right away, we got from 0 to 12 people. And then we figured out, all right, maybe we grew a little too fast. And then we kind of shrunk a little bit, and we got back to where we were, and then minus a little bit, and then got back, and kind of like, we've been in this area where we're about a dozen people, and that's kind of working for us right now. But how are we going to get to that next level of doubling or tripling or quadrupling?
Right. And we'll get there by being uncomfortable like we've been, and that's what now we're comfortable with being uncomfortable. And to use a Brene Brown term, we rumble. And, the management team, we rumble with each other, and we're okay there. We collaborate, we have constructive conflict, going on the 5 behaviors that Lentini and I are practitioners of. Like, we get it, and we trust each other, and we build a good, strong relationship. So point being is imposter syndrome doesn't need to keep you from doing something or taking an opportunity or taking a chance or growing, so don't fear that term imposter syndrome, and don't look at it as something bad. Look at it as an opportunity. So, I like to try to keep to time. So as we close out, give us one piece of advice from each of you for somebody that is faced with this. Josh, go ahead. You can start us off.
I mean, this just reminded me, we were speaking about, like 3.5 years later, it's sticking with it, right? Like, just because you don't think you're good or not this, or I don't know if I could do this, and maybe you walk away from it, but like, look at us, like we stuck this, we stuck it out 3.5, almost, 4 years later, and we're doing great. But it could have easily walked away and said, this is too hard, or I don't think we could do this or this or that, blah, blah, blah. So it's really like sticking with your gut and working hard and fixing mistakes and making mistakes, and trusting yourself and working with your team.
Yeah, for sure.
It's consistency.
With your team. Yeah, consistency is key. Karen, we're gonna do a whole show about consistency. Lentini, what would you say to close us out? What is your sage advice for people?
Well, I don't know if it's sage, but I can tell you this, that I've learned the hard way, that we live in a miracle. And typically what reaches us is meant for us. It was never meant to miss us. And what misses us was never meant to reach us. So to Josh's point, Karen's point, is that you plant your feet and run towards it, thinking, what's the gift in this discomfort? Whatever you decide to call it. Because it might be the imposter syndrome. It might be the small-minded thinker that resides in all of us. Run towards it. What's the gift in this? We do live in a miracle.
All right, Karen, What say you?
I think in general, imposter syndrome is great to look at, but it's more important of how you're going to problem solve it, because it's not a diagnosis. It's not,
it's have not a disease
and it's terminal and you can't get rid of it. And I do truly believe that, especially with those 5 imposter syndromes from Dr. Young, like we all possess that, but how do you problem solve it? And that's what I'd like, the audience to kind of take away from that the most.
Right. Because you can problem solve anything. Take it from
Yeah.
all 4 of us. We're quite adept at that. Okay, a little commercial as we end. Visit us at staffagency.com. We do workforce development. We do recruiting and staffing. We do training. We do executive coaching. Visit Steve at stevelentini.com. And the website that's scrolling along the bottom will show you where to find the show. Is also on Spotify. And it is also up on YouTube, so you can watch past shows as we start to collect shows. And so we hope you have a great weekend, and we'll be back next week with another enlightening episode of The Round Table. All right, folks, take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen and Josh. Thank you all.